We keep on saying it, but I think we've run out of words to talk about this man. Giannis with another 50-point performance against the Clippers team that, let's be honest, this was a spectacle we don't see too often. Everyone was playing and it went down to the wire and there was defense on both ends. And ultimately, there was one player that stood above everyone else on the floor among all the All-Stars and all the accolades these guys have. It's Giannis. We're going to talk about him because the Bucks win 106-105. This will be a game we'll remember for a while.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and also find my work over at ESPN alongside me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden, for today's episode that's brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. And I think Ivica Zubac is going to be looking for a new job because his previous role as the Giannis stopper is no longer appropriate for this man. We thank everyone for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every single day. We appreciate it. If you subscribe to the show or you're new to the show and you're just tuning in because you want to hear two people talk about Giannis scoring 50, we appreciate it. Subscribe, turn the notifications on. We're podcasting every day. This was a classic Giannis performance, Frank. We are fortunate enough to talk about him after these games that he has, but another 54 points tonight, his second 50-point game in a week, third on the season. And this, I joke about Zubac, but this, to me, was the perfect encapsulation of why you got to play 48 minutes against this man, because Zubac did have some good, decent moments, and Giannis was settling for jump shots in the first quarter, and by the end of it, Zubac was on the bench because he fouled out, and Giannis was just willing to attack anyone and anything that stood in his way, and he proved too much. I just saw a tweet. I didn't realize it at the time. Giannis, 20 points in the fourth quarter. The Clippers, 18 points in the fourth quarter. This man was just absolutely unstoppable.
Before the game, I joked because this game was at 9:15. I said, "Oh, Giannis is going to get two naps. He's going to go for 60 points and 21 rebounds." Pretty close, Kane.
Yes,
pretty close. Although it did not look like it was going to be one of those nights early on. I mean, granted, we know Giannis will have these games where, he'll score like 6 points in the first half and explode for 32 in the second. So we know that the correlation between how he plays early in games is not necessarily high with how he's going to play later. But it was interesting. I mean, we saw kind of the game plan that the Clippers were going to use against the Bucks. Zubac was going to sit back. The Clippers were going to largely kind of stay home. They were going to make Giannis have to score, and if he's going to shoot jump shots against them, hey, go right ahead, right? And I think we saw early in the game he kind of fell into the trap of settling for hey, you're going to give me like a 15-footer, you're going to give me wide open three, I'm going to try to make you pay for that. And I think his first the Bucks first 7 possessions or something like that, he had 0 for 4 from the field, 0 for 2 from the line, and 1 or 2 turnovers. So it was it was a rough start. But Stan Van Gundy, who I generally like Stan, obviously he knows, has forgotten more about basketball than I'll ever know. I think he's generally a good analyst, but I think he was crediting Zubac a little too much for the lack of success that Giannis was having. And we saw when he came back late in the first quarter, the Bucks, again, it was the stagnancy of that early kind of part of the game just sort of took root. And I think what was it 24-9 at one point. I think they had 5 points in the first 6 minutes or something. They were playing in cement, felt like, in the first part of the game. And Giannis then attacks Zubac with momentum a couple times in the first quarter, and then early in the second quarter he gets the third foul on Zubac, and that's when he really started to get going. He's got 20 at halftime, and then second half didn't matter who you're putting in front of him. He was going up, over, through Zubac, just freak of nature stuff, right? The stuff that we will always remember about Giannis. He was putting on full display, and even knocks down a couple threes. Took 8 of them. I think he missed his first 4 before he hit his first one. So 2 for 4, I think, in the second half. But again, just a guy seeing his team struggling, and Giannis, the Clippers seemed to be kind of baiting him into, hey, beat us. And Giannis was like, okay, I'll beat you. And next thing you know, He's at 34 through 3 quarters, which I think the game really swung, right? The Bucks come out of halftime. The Bucks were leading 39-38. Clippers go on a little bit of a run. Again, Bucks just the 3-point shooting was working against them all game long. And then early in the third quarter, again, they come out and again just felt like more just bad vibes coming in the locker room. Jrue Holiday was 0 for 6 in the first half. New All-Star Jrue Holiday. This should be a night of celebration for him. We will be able to celebrate that coming off the win, and he made some big plays in the second half. But he goes 0 for 6 in the first half. I think he missed 2 shots to start the third. I mean, he got pulled 3 minutes into the third quarter, and Bud's like grasping at straws. It was like Joe Ingles, Grayson, and Pat Connaughton trying to defend Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and it felt like the game was just slipping away. They go down by as many as 21, but Giannis comes back towards the end. They start chipping away, and I thought 2 huge plays. Giannis hits a 3, a pull-up 3. He was trying to go, I think, 2 for 1. Hits a pull-up 3 to make it a 10-point game, and then the Bucks get the ball back with 5 seconds left. They got to stop. That's a theme of the night. Stops. The defense was awesome, and he takes another pull-up 3 with the clock running down. And Wes Matthews, or as I referred to him on Twitter after the final possession, Wes fucking Matthews, just jumps up, goes for the rebound, and effort level pays off. He gets a foul call, only made 1 free throw, but all of a sudden, hey, you're only down 9 going into the fourth quarter. And I just thought that end of the third quarter, I mean, really like the second half of the third quarter, Chris Middleton, again, still on that minutes limit. He had a huge 3 in the fourth quarter, which was cool to see. That brought the Bucks within 2. I kind of like the end there was thinking like, can we please just get Chris Middleton on the floor for the last 2 minutes? Like, can we go from 20 to 22 minutes maybe? But again, we saw the impact of Chris, what he can do, the, sort of just the stabilizing influence that he brings on this offense, getting to his spots and hitting shots. And then Giannis kind of comes back and starts to really force his, impose his will. And obviously in the fourth quarter, it was the Giannis show, 20 points. And again, didn't have to make it 1 point. They had multiple chances to make this game more comfortable. Giannis making plays, hitting shots, missed a couple free throws, but then hits 2 big free throws to give them the lead. And then both teams just kind of play defense the rest of the game. And thankfully, Giannis, we've talked about backcourt turnovers being this big problem all season long for the Bucks, these just like agonizing backcourt turnovers. And so what happens? Up 1, Giannis dribbling the ball, they're going to have to foul. Backcourt turnover, miscommunication. I mean, that would have been a horrible way to lose because of a backcourt turnover by Giannis. But thankfully, Wes Matthews and Jrue, they were switching in the fourth quarter, and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. It's the same story that we saw 2 years ago. Bucks won 105-100 at at Fiserv Forum. That was back when, remember when like they still didn't have fans? It was one of those games. Giannis had that big dunk late in the game off of ball movement. He had like 36 in that game. And the Clippers just got into ISO ball. Those 2 guys didn't really try to get anybody else involved, and the Bucks were able to snuff it out. And again, tonight we see that the small ball was huge for the Bucks. They got crushed in the Brook Lopez minutes, but people like Wes Matthews playing defense, Jrue Holiday playing defense, and eventually hitting some shots. And of course, Giannis doing what Giannis does. Again, we talk about like signature wins for college teams, like trying to build their tournament resumes. You don't really have that in the NBA, but I think as you were alluding to earlier, when we think back on this season, hey, what were the like most memorable wins? Obviously, anytime Giannis gets a 50 burger, that's going to be pretty impressive. But doing it in these circumstances compared to, again, not to diminish scoring 50 against any other opponent, but doing it against like the Wizards or whatever. It's a different type of accomplishment versus doing it against a Clipper team that has top tier talent. And that really made you work for this win. So for him to pull out a 54-point, 18 rebound performance to carry the Bucks to a win, that's pretty damn cool. And again, given the comeback and all that, I think we've seen this team come back from big deficits before this season. And I think it's one of those things that you just sort of like mark down a little bit and say, okay, when they're in those spots in the postseason, hopefully you're not going to be on 21 much, but we know this team has the character to kind of fight back. And I felt even like late in the game, I thought, if they lose this game, I can live with it, right? I mean, they came back, they got it to basically a coin toss type game down the stretch. Thankfully, they win another close game. And send fans home, maybe tired with the very late close, but certainly also very happy.
Tired but happy. It sounded like a rowdy crowd at Fiserv Forum, which we love as well. And in many ways, you look at some of the numbers. I want to get to them in a little bit. It was a very Bucksy win. I felt like I was watching some playoff basketball. Not able to shoot threes, low scoring, but the Bucks were able to get a win. So we'll get to that, particularly some of the lineup stuff, because I think it's really interesting, particularly with Chris not out there towards the end. Like, there's some upside for this Bucks team. But first, I want to talk about LinkedIn, the sponsor of today's show. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 depends on team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs hires the qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on their job qualifications all on one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires, first leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So before we get to some of this lineup stuff, just some more Giannis. Let's stick with Giannis there, just with this Clippers team and the way they stack up. So there's some differences there, but as I was watching this, and this is why I was thrilled that Kawhi and PG and everyone were playing, because to me, like, the Clippers are kind of an afterthought because they're out in the West, and if the Bucks are going to have to play them, it's in a finals matchup. So it is a long way in the past. But they're kind of they are like the Celtics in the way that they have multiple guys. Like, it's a similar matchup. So I really wanted to see how the Bucks were going to match up and also how they were going to defend him. Now, I don't know if you quite picked up on this with Stan Van Gundy, but I think by the end of the game, he wanted Kawhi to defend Giannis. Honestly, seriously, Stan, I love Stan as well, but he was mentioning it 3 times per minute. His per 36-minute rate for mentioning he wanted to see Kawhi on Giannis was through the roof, Hall of Fame levels. And we've always kind of discussed this, but the idea, and it doesn't have to be someone absolutely elite like Kawhi Leonard, like preferably because it's going to make life a little easier. But with the Zubac stuff, as you kind of pointed to, I mean, I just would have taken him off the floor. Now, Robert Covington had zero luck trying to defend Giannis, so I don't think he was the answer. But if you got Kawhi or even Paul George, if you've got someone in Giannis's face on the perimeter, at least he doesn't get the 3 steps to get the runway and then be able to score on top of you, and you pretty much got no choice but to foul. So it does feel like the Clippers walked away from this probably thinking they've got some stuff up their sleeve too, which is kind of weird because, as I said, it would be an NBA Finals matchup. But I thought it was at least a little bit bizarre. And when it came to the final turnover where Giannis sort of threw the ball out of bounds, it looked like everyone was confused. Like, you would think if Giannis gets the rebounds, first of all, he can take the foul if he wants to. That's fine. I would have no problem if he wants to take that responsibility. But why isn't someone smart enough to know and get around him? Like, Pat Connaughton is running up the floor. Like, what is going on? And then Giannis,
because they weren't like out and out trapping him quite yet, you know. No. So it's like, it's one thing if you So again,
you just would like to see smarter execution.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah. I mean, thank goodness it didn't end up hurting them. And I mean, talk about there's been so much narrative this season, obviously, about the lack of or the how many times we see these marquee matchups ruined by injuries, resting, whatever. And the Clippers, obviously a team that has, kind of leads the league in that. Bucks obviously have done it a lot as well. So, I was just happy when we saw yesterday Giannis show up as probable on the injury report. Mm-hmm. We talked on Wednesday about some of the concerns when he had kind of that came down on the knee a little bit janky at the very end of the Hornets game. But yeah, I mean, you could say, hey, seeing a full strength Bucks team against a full strength Clippers team, apologies to Bobby Portis, obviously, but at least you have the big 3 of the Bucks and the kind of core of the Clippers available. Hey, it's like a Bigfoot sighting, it's like quick, somebody take a picture of it. But
because they'll play next week. Next weekend, no one's playing. We all
right.
It's know
it's the second night of a back-to-back, so nobody's playing. But it was just one of these games, right? I mean, this, we try to call it out, and usually when we call it out, it's because of a special Giannis performance. this is why we watch regular season basketball, right? Like there's so much discussion about the devaluing of the regular season, and how the product is being spoiled to an extent by the fact that you just don't know if the best players are going to show up on a given night. And so, let's just pause and just say, like, thank you, basketball gods, for letting us see these two teams both rested. And Kawhi Leonard tonight, 7 of 26. I mean, that was I think a great defensive job that the Bucks did on him. I still think he got to like decent spots, especially against Jrue Holiday. Jrue was defending him early. That may have been why Jrue struggled as much as he does. It's like the whole playoff Jrue Holiday problem where he's expending a ton of energy defensively, and does that impact him offensively? He finishes 4 of 15, 12 points, 8 assists, 3 turnovers in 34 minutes. So after the 0 for 8 start, I think he finished 4 of 7, including a couple of big threes. But I thought, again, the kind of team effort on Kawhi, we saw occasionally guys like Grayson and not Pat so much, but it felt like Grayson got switched onto him a number of times. And again, not really ideal circumstances, but Wes and Chris, even at times, like I thought, again, having the full complement of wings that they have right now, obviously it's really important. But I think it also, the fact that you had stretches where you had, Bud was stacking Grayson and Joe and Pat at the same time. I mean, I think it does highlight, like, well, this is, I guess, why they're interested in Jay Crowder, right? For a matchup like this, or a matchup with the Celtics, because you just have a bit more optionality to get a stronger guy out there who can knock down threes. And, fortunately tonight, Wes Matthews goes 0 for 4 from the field. All of them are threes. Almost hit that 3 late when they were up 1 off a kick out from Giannis. That would have been, a potential dagger. But hey, no worries. He earned his keep defensively. And again, I mean, we saw it last year again. Obviously, we didn't see it during Wes's first stint because Jrue wasn't here yet. But when you put Jrue and Wes on the floor and you put them on the 2 best wing players, the freedom you have to switch defensively is just a great luxury to have, right? And yeah, I mean, again, I'd say most teams would probably rather attack Wes than Jrue, but you saw tonight, especially in the second half. I mean, Wes is just a strong dude, and he's really like a useful guy to have, even at his age. He's not playing every game. We've seen a lot more of him with Bobby Portis out, but against these kind of power wing type guys like Kawhi, just the fact that he's so sturdy and strong. Again, he's not going to be a vertical athlete or anything like that, but he can at least hold his ground and make those guys shoot kind of hard jump shots. And Exhibit A was the very last play of the game when that was one of Kawhi's probably hardest shots he took all night. And again, shades of Philly versus Toronto a little bit.
Oh, Kawhi, I did think that just because of the spot,
from the spot, shooting from that right side of the floor. Thankfully, Wes Matthews is a better defender than the entirety of the Philadelphia 76ers team. So so they end up getting that. I mean, ironically, it's such a funny game to look at from the plus minus, because this was such a game of runs.
I was just looking at that.
Yeah. Kawhi was plus 19 in 40 minutes. Marcus Morris was plus 23. I thought Marcus Morris would be sort of like the, least bad compromise option to defend Giannis. He did at times tonight. He's done that obviously in the past. Again, not that Marcus Morris is going to stop Giannis either, but I think probably a lot of it is just, Kawhi physically, they just are very wary of wearing him down. And I think especially in the regular season, they just don't want to give him the task of having to battle with a guy like Giannis. But he had a couple good moments. He had a block on Giannis after Giannis missed Giannis missed like a layup basically. And then I don't know why it was called a jump ball, to be honest. Like the ball kind of got out of Giannis. It was kind of like weird. It was like the refs I felt like they had to reward the defensive play or something. So it should have been like just a put back by Giannis, but whatever. Didn't matter in the end. But yeah, I mean, just a fun matchup to see in the regular season. And I thought, especially late in the game, the Clippers becoming so predictable, and like all they do is 2-man game, and give credit to the Bucks, right? I mean, if you send a ton of help, maybe then those guys would actually pass. But the Bucks didn't have to send help. Jrue and West primarily were able to keep those guys, 1v1 more or less. And so those other guys didn't get involved. And thank God Norm Powell didn't get a bunch of shots off late. Norm Powell, Bucks killer extraordinaire, 26 points on 16 shots, 4 of 8 from 3. But he was a minus 27 too, which seems like crazy,
bucket
right?
for bucket, baby.
It felt like the entire time he was on the floor that like I was just on pins and needles, waiting for the Bucks to leave him open or whatever. By the way, going small against Norm Powell with Javon Carter, not the answer. That was rough to watch. Javon did not cover himself in glory in the fourth quarter there. He had a brief stint, missed a couple of questionable 3-point shots. And again, just the lack of size really hurt him against Norm Powell. But he did have that one nice play where he forced a turnover off of Paul George or whatever it was. So, but yeah, I mean, and I think really though the most interesting plus minus is Brooke Lopez, who obviously we love Brooke, but a minus 32 in a game where Zubac's played 29 minutes, right? So it's not like there was a lack of a non-stretch. There was a non-stretch big man out there for him to defend. But again, I'd say the minus 32. There's a lot of flukiness in there. But again, just this was a game of runs, and again, we've seen it during their title run. There are going to be times when the Bucks are going to be better playing small, and I think that's one of the upsides of this stretch without Bobby is that this is forcing the Bucks to have to play that way a little bit more, have to play small, put Giannis at center, surround him with switchable wings, and obviously we saw ultimately the result we wanted tonight.
All right, I got a Jay Crowder question for you. Obviously, he's a talking point. You mentioned his name earlier, so we're going to get to that in just a bit after we talk about FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown, which is interesting because I got the first touchdown scorer here. Now, Travis Kelce is the favorite, plus 650. But I'm interested if you go down. Now, look, I'm not going to try and pretend that I know who's scoring touchdowns for the Chiefs, but Patty Mahomes, plus 2,900. That sounds like pretty good value. But what if you think there's going to be a defensive touchdown, plus 3,500 for the Kansas City defense, plus 3,800 for the Philadelphia defense? So anyway, check it out at FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And best of all, you get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/locked-on to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and also the Locked On Podcast Network. So this closing lineup, you've referenced it. And as I was watching it, I was just, my eyes were veering to the bench and poor old Chris Middleton in his warm-up sitting on the bench, probably wishing that he was going to be out there, which brings me to a comment from Mike Budenholzer after this game. He was asked about Chris's minutes and playing alongside Giannis and Jrue Holiday. And he said, "We're trying to use Chris's minutes judiciously. Giannis needed a break, and so Chris went in. I know he made a walk-up three and hit his mark. I think 3 of them played together for that little stretch at the start of the fourth quarter. We were down 9 to start, and I think the Chris 3 cut it to 2, and he was done. And we just had to find a way to do it without Chris. But those 3 guys are going to play a ton together, which we would expect. But there you go. So it was never a consideration to bring Chris back out on the floor. But if Chris comes in, so you've got Wes, Jrue, Pat Connaughton, Joe Ingles, Giannis tonight. So Chris obviously replaces probably, maybe Joe. Could be Wes, could be Pat, one of those guys. Did tonight, watching this team and the matchups that you're playing the Clippers, and, the Grayson Allen being switched onto Kawhi and was similar to the Celtics stuff that we've seen in the past, did anything about this game tonight make you sit back and say, yeah, I want Jay Crowder more than I did before this game tipped off?
I mean, I think especially the third quarter definitely made me feel like that. I think in a lot of ways, the Clippers are like the Boston Celtics minus ball movement. If Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum just never passed, basically, then I'm exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, I mean, I think part of it though is honestly, Chris Middleton just still isn't playing, full minutes as a starter. If this was the playoffs, he'd be in the high 30s. Well, I'll say this, by the playoffs, knock on wood, he'll be a guy that can play high 30s, 40, low 40s in terms of minutes per game. So that obviously makes a huge difference because that's, an extra 20 minutes compared to what he played tonight. So, that can like essentially wipe out the need for an entire other rotation guy, right? But I think, again, it felt like a Celtics game though, in the fact that, Grayson Allen takes 3 shots in 24 minutes. And I thought he was guarding Paul George to start, if I recall correctly. It was Jrue on Kawhi and Grayson on Paul George, which, that's saying something if they're putting him on Paul George rather than Pat Connaughton, who, again, Pat is not a stopper, but, is certainly a solid defender. And I think, they're both listed at 6'4", but I feel like Pat's plays a little bit bigger than Grayson does. So I think that was a statement of, certainly their belief in him. And, Paul George, 6 of 16 for 16 points tonight. It's not like Paul George was roasting Grayson or anybody else. But either way, I think if you did have a Jay Crowder on your bench, I think certainly you could have more easily had lineups that kind of match up like for like when you wanted to go small. But again, we talked about in our last pod, like, you kind of just look at who you've got right now. Joe Ingles is going to play. Chris Middleton obviously is going to play. Pat Connaughton's going to play. And so, you can easily carve out Jay Crowder minutes, I'd say right now, probably. But it'd mainly be just him subbing in for Wes Matthews. And again, like if you're having to defend like smaller guys, Jay Crowder hasn't defended. I don't think Jay Crowder's really defended smaller players, like smaller wing guys, pretty much at all. And I think that's one thing that Wes does well is he defends twos and at times even ones reasonably well. Again, he doesn't. You don't want him on like really quick guys, but he is versatile and switchable defensively. And Crowder has some of those same skill sets, but I don't know. How much better is Jay Crowder than Wes Matthews? It's an interesting question. I think one of the reasons Jay Crowder is open to coming to Milwaukee is because his buddy Wes Matthews is here. And I'm sure
you know what the benefit is? They're both old, so you just play them on alternate nights because we need to save these legs, make sure they are fresh for the postseason because Wes is playing great.
Yeah, and the irony is like it's funny because it's like I always think of Crowder like in my head. It's like he's like a 6'8" type guy, but no, he's like listed at like 6'6". He's like 6'6". He's not actually that tall, and he has some very Bucksian tendencies in terms of. He's kind of a feast or famine 3-point shooter. You can put it on the floor a little bit, but you really don't trust him to go create shots. And he's strong, but he's not athletic. And I feel like, he's not like explosive. And I feel like that's very, very much a hallmark of Bucks wings in terms of being more like, like kind of the like Wes, you look at Wes, Joe, Chris, like none of them are explosive. Obviously varying degrees of sort of strength among that group. But yeah, again, it's like, would I take Jay Crowder for free? Sure. But I think the obvious question is then like, okay, what are you doing lineup wise then? And if Wes Matthews doesn't play at all, well, he can't be mad at Jay Crowder because I think he wants him on the team because they're Marquette guys together. But I don't know. I think probably there may be matchups where Wes could still be a better option. But again, part of this too is just having the resiliency and the depth so that when one or two of these guys get hurt, then all of a sudden you're not sitting around complaining about depth and like, oh, we need another guy, right? That's, again, you want to be kind of loaded for bear that when it comes to the playoffs in terms of having enough guys. Again, that does beg the question of just how do you kind of feed all these mouths and, from a longer term cost standpoint, who are you going to pay and who are you not going to pay? But, again, hey, end of the day, you didn't need Jay Crowder or anybody else tonight. You only needed 20 minutes of Chris Middleton, which was convenient. And again, hopefully we will see more and more of Chris Middleton, but 16 points, 7 boards, 2 assists tonight. Another solid game. And again, just brought that kind of steadying influence off the bench. But it was funny. Only Giannis and Chris both only had 2 assists, which is obviously low numbers for them. And overall, this was not a game for ball movement. Only 16 assists for the Bucks, only 15 for the Clippers, and very rock fight-ish in terms of the overall numbers. Both teams at 105 defensive rating or offensive rating, which is obviously well below average offensively and very good defensively. So we've been talking about how the Bucks defense has been very good of late, even if the possession numbers have inflated that a little bit tonight. And again, tonight was another very good defensive effort. Both teams took care of the ball. Again, Bucks better offensive rebounding than the Clippers, but both teams generally did a very good job there. So yeah, Bucks defense very impressive, and offense less impressive, but did enough. And it's funny just looking at the shot charts in this game. Clippers took 17% of their shots at the rim, which is in the third percentile. Bucks took 39% of their shots at the rim. Bucks 20 of 29 at the rim. Clippers 8 of 14. And the Clippers took twice as many long mid-range jump shots, but hit the exact same number, 6 of 24 versus 6 of 12 for the Bucks. And again, that just gets to the defense. And again, you probably got a little lucky with Kawhi and Paul George maybe missing more of those mid-rangers than you might otherwise expect. But Bucks kind of played the math game, and this in spite of the fact that, I think that another really silver lining part of this game, Bucks were 24% from three. We obviously talked a lot about how good they've been from the 3-point line of late. Tonight was early season Bucks form in terms of the 3-point shooting, 9 for 37. Clippers were 13 of 36. So, essentially for the almost same number of shots, Clippers had 12 extra points that they got from the 3-point line. So kind of stack the deck against yourself a little bit. But even though the Clippers, they only had, I think, 7 turnovers, Bucks only 10, which, considering how the Bucks have been so far this season, that's pretty encouraging as well. So yeah, really good win, fun win, awesome performance from Giannis. And again, with some better teams and the road trip coming up for the Bucks, I mean, if you can snag these quality wins to kind of keep the streak going, I mean, again, nice to not immediately slip back into third after the Bucks were able to jump the Sixers to get into the second spot in the East. So again, hopefully, can you build an extended streak here and put some wins on the board? It would be nice. But again, we'll see. Let's just enjoy this one for at least 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly right. And you asked whether the Bucks, you're not sure whether the Bucks need Jay Crowder. I think that's right. But what our listeners need is the Locked On Game to Game podcast. So make sure you check it out on your Locked On NBA feed. You'll get the recaps from across the network. Maybe check out how our friends over at Locked On Clippers are doing tonight. Like Frank said, I'd say they're probably feeling relatively optimistic. Nothing too crazy about it. And they're probably just happy that their star players have been playing recently as well. So the Clippers are really good. As I said, who knows which one of these players is going to play next week when these two teams meet up in LA after the Lakers game. We'll see. But listen to Locked On Game to Game podcast. Of course, we're going to have some more trade chat over the next week. The deadline's getting closer. If it's not Jay Crowder, it could be some other names. Apparently, the Bucks are very active. Apparently, they're working the phone. So I'm sure we're going to have more podcasts. Hit the notification, subscribe, do all that stuff, and you'll know when we drop a podcast there, Frank. And one final congratulations. Jrue Holiday, 10 years since he was last an All-Star. That was in the pre-processed 76ers. Frank, we've been doing such a good job of this last week after I got a bit of a kick up the ass for the length of our podcast. So if you've got something else to say, please feel free. But, you just show up here. I'm here. I know. It's a job. I
just loiter here. I just loiter here, right? Like I owe nothing to no one. I just come because this is fun. Jrue Holiday, I tweeted something to the same effect, but Jrue Holiday, a little more than 2 years since he arrived in Milwaukee, NBA champion, all defensive first team, Olympic gold medalist, with Twyman Stokes teammate of the year, I think it was the name of the award he won. Find me a more likable dude in the NBA. Now finally an all-star once again. Man, just a... You just feel, I mean, again, this just kind of like brings me back to thinking about the Bucks winning a championship. Like, just again, when you see people like Jrue Holiday, Brooke Lopez, obviously Brooke didn't make the All-Star team, but having an awesome year. People like Jrue, Brooke, Chris, Giannis, the fact that this group has been able to come together, accomplish so much, gotten a degree of recognition for themselves, and ultimately also won a championship, will be immortal in Milwaukee forever. Again, we all want another championship. We get that, but again, a fun night to celebrate Jrue Holiday, a fun night to celebrate Giannis Antetokounmpo, and it's always a good night to celebrate the Bucks winning an NBA championship, just whatever it was 18 months ago. So shout out to Bucks fans. Enjoy your Fridays. Enjoy your weekends.
And as I said in my Locked On Bucks short that you can find on the Locked On Bucks YouTube page, Jrue is also the best perimeter defensive player in the league, defensive player of the year in our hearts, and potentially would already have that award if he was a little more shameless like their friends over in Boston and just appealing for every single award, even though perhaps not quite the way it should have gone. So anyway, Jrue Holiday, maybe a defensive player of the year. He's owed one. All right, we're going to podcast. There's a game on the weekend, so maybe we'll podcast on the weekend. We'll figure it out. But like I said, subscribe, notifications on, and you'll know when we drop our next show. And at the very least, we're back on Monday for a podcast as well. Enjoy this. Watch the replay of this Bucks Clippers game. Watch the fourth quarter again. Giannis had 54. He's on fire. Maybe on the way to a third MVP. We'll catch you guys next time.